Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ryan's Ranch Roundup. I'm your host, Ryan Heiss. And on today's episode, we're going to be looking at one of Florida's most majestic creatures, the American alligator. When people think of Florida, they think of abundant sunshine, beaches, palm trees, oranges, and alligators. We're going to go out in the field and we're going to hunt for an alligator in one of our 300 stormwater retention ponds. We're also going to get a close-up encounter with an alligator today. So get excited. So we're joined by Jason Waller with the Fish and Wildlife Commission. He's brought along a little baby gator that he just caught in a marsh yesterday. He does not have a name, so we get an opportunity to name him today, and we decided on Happy. And so Jason, I was wondering if you could just start by telling us a little bit about the biology of the gator, perhaps starting with the teeth. Although this guy's little, I can tell that his teeth are pretty intimidating. Tell me a little bit about the gator.
Oh, this guy, his teeth, they're not that bad. They're not really developed. Right now he's just eating mostly insects and things like that in the marsh. We just put the rubber band on there because even though he ain't really going to hurt you, he's got a little pressure if he clamps down. But this little guy was born most likely last September. When they're born, they're about 8 inches long, so he's grown probably close to a foot, during this first year of life. So he's probably had pretty good nutrition.
And how fast do they grow?
Well, they grow about, it depends on temperature and what they eat, but they can grow up to a foot a year early on up until they start getting to bigger sizes, like around 5 or 6 feet. Then their growth pace starts to slow down.
Okay. Is this a male or a female?
On this one, it's, to tell, you'd have to get really invasive with them.
Okay, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Poor guy. We'll just say that he's Mr. Happy, and he's...
Happy's a pretty good universal name. It could be a
So,
boy or a girl.
in the urban environment, and we'll just call Lakewood Ranch an urban environment, do the alligators move from pond to pond?
Yeah. I mean, there can be different reasons. It could be for food. It could be for another adult has moved in and is kind of pushing alligators to another pond.
Okay. Is there typically, sorry to interrupt, but is there typically one alligator per pond?
No, it depends. I mean, it depends on the size of the pond. It depends on the size of the individuals that are occupying the pond. If they're smaller, there can be if they're smaller, they tend to get along better. When you get a big male or something like that in there, he doesn't tend to play as well with the others. So
Gotcha.
population dynamics can kind of dictate that kind of stuff.
Okay. And now all of our ponds are interconnected by concrete culvert pipes. Do the alligators travel in those culverts, or do they move over by land, or how do they get from pond to pond?
Probably both. They like to travel through culverts.
So what would Happy be eating as a juvenile alligator, and then what do they eat as they mature?
Okay. Well, this little guy, he's going to be eating invertebrates mostly, insects, things like that. Anything small enough for him to handle that he can find in the marsh. And as he grows, his diet's going to change. It'll start to, as they get bigger, it'll transition to bigger invertebrates, fish. You get to adult, pretty much anything's a possibility in the marsh if they can get it. Could be birds, fish, turtles. So just they're pretty opportunistic. So whatever they can, if they can get it and they can gobble it down, they'll do it.
Okay, and what about trash, or people that discard meat in a trash can? Would they ever go after something like that?
In a trash can, probably not, but if people discard meat into the water, then yeah. That's a common thing about fish cleaning stations, is that's why they want people to put their fish scraps in garbage cans and not throw them into the water, because like I said, they are opportunistic. So if there's floating fish parts up there in the water, they'll come up and start feeding on it.
Okay, and I think we're going to talk a little bit later on about feeding alligators, and it is against the law to feed alligators, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And during mating season, are alligators moving about more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of mating season, it's a combination of the weather's warming up, so their metabolisms are becoming quicker because they're heating up. They're different than us. They need sunlight and external temperature to heat up their metabolism, and that just gets everything going. They're feeding more, looking for a mate, and all that kind of comes with the spring and the warmer temperatures.
Okay. So in my travels through Lakewood Ranch, I often see alligators on the lake bank, sometimes with their mouths open, but often they look like they're just hanging out in the sun. What are they doing exactly?
If they're just hanging out in the sun, usually they're warming up. Thermoregulating, they call it. Alligators, unlike humans, our body temperature comes from internal mechanisms. Theirs comes from the sunlight. So if you see one out in the sun basking, it's usually just getting his body temperature warmed up. It could be he's eaten something recently too, and that'll help him digest. It just gets the digestive juices flowing by heating up in the sun.
So if he's sitting there with his mouth open, he's not angry, he's just...
No, and sometimes that's part of a way to thermoregulate too.
Okay. And when it's really cold out, do they act differently, or?
Yeah, when it's colder, once the ambient temperature reaches certain level, drops below certain levels, they're going to do things such as they're going to stop eating because they might not be able to break the food down because they're not going to be warm enough.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to move into areas where they may have to slow down. They may slow down body functions and things like that. So they're going to move into safer areas out of sight when it's cooler. And then on a nice warm day, though, they may pop out and try and warm up. It just varies. They vary up their behavior during those times.
Yeah, very good. So we just learned a little bit about the biology of the alligator, and now we're going to go out into the field and hunt for an alligator on one of our 300 stormwater ponds. Recently, Lakewood Ranch applied for and received a target harvest area permit, which allows us to form a relationship with a number of trappers in our area, better control where these trappers are going. We got a lot of calls from our residents concerned about trappers coming in, essentially poaching alligators that pose no threat to anyone. And they were concerned about that, so we went through that process. But what else can you tell us about a target harvest area permit and how that could benefit our communities?
The target harvest area is meant, especially like a place like Lakewood Ranch, where you guys have over 300 small lakes and things like that. It gives you more flexibility and more involvement in the process. It streamlines things. So when there is actually a confirmed nuisance alligator, the permit and everything is already in place. You can call the trapper, get it taken care of.
I want to thank Jason and Happy for helping us with this episode. It's really important for homeowners to understand that gators, by and large, do not pose a threat to themselves or to their pets, and they just need to apply common sense when living in Florida, Southwest Florida, and Lakewood Ranch. Also, I've been told that Happy is going to be released unharmed tomorrow back in the swamp from which he came. So I'm sure he is thrilled about that. You're probably just about tired of me, huh, buddy? So thanks again. Thanks for joining us on Ryan's Ranch Roundup. We hope to see you again soon.